Bill Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Music Com Academy. It's been a while since I've done one of these, partially because I just sort of ran out of lessons for music radio. We're going to be doing this today with somebody that I think is, at the higher echelons of talk radio, and he's been that way for a long time. And we have had millions of conversations over the years about talk radio and just radio in general. And I thought it'd be really cool for us to have one here and also go through his career, which is pretty unique in that he has been at major markets in the US and Canada, Toronto and Los Angeles, number 3 and number 2 in North America. So let me introduce you to Bill Carroll.
Hey, good to see you, Pat.
God, I can't remember the last time I saw you. I'd say when I kind of retired, so it's been 15, 16 years, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
I've heard you a lot
on doing this and follow you on social media. I miss our conversations. We had some great ones over the years. And, I find as talk radio gets smaller and smaller and part of bigger and bigger corporations, I miss those conversations we used to have in the program director's office with you and some of the other hosts and maybe a consultant or two in the mix, just to talk about the big picture stuff and how you make your craft better and how you make your station better. And I feel like I've reached that point in my career where everyone kind of just leaves me alone, ask a question and they think I'm just being polite. Oh, Bill, you know what you're doing. I don't have to tell you. Well, Gretzky had a coach. It doesn't matter how good you are. It helps to have an educated ear listen to you and make some suggestions. And you'll be surprised to hear that because I always push back against suggestions in my career. But
yeah, true. Or air checks. It's like, no, I don't want your air check.
Yeah. Well, the pushing back is sometimes where you'd learn too, because I'd say, no, I don't think that's going to work for me. And then we'd argue it out. And I told you recently on the phone, I said, my only regret with you is I didn't listen to you just a little bit more because I just started doing morning talk radio at the time. And I was probably a little dismissive, like, you're a music guy and you don't even follow the news and you're not going to tell me what to do. And the reality is, no, when I went to KFI, the morning man had heart surgery. He was off for a long time. So I was filling in doing a morning show. And I realized it's a little bit of a different animal in the morning. Like the tone has to be just a little different and you can't be too intense for too long. You can still be opinionated and hard hitting, but people are just waking up, all that kind of stuff. And I thought, yeah, Pat Holliday said this to me and I was starting to learn it then, but I really honed it in LA during that fill-in time. And I was the constant morning guy fill-in. And, that's stuff that I learned from you. And like I said, I wish I'd listened. If I'd listened more at the time, I could have learned it faster instead of the hard way. But you'll be glad to know I eventually got there. So thank you.
Sometimes the hard way is a good way too. What they always say, you only learn from your mistakes and, and hard knocks and stuff along the way. So yeah, we'll come back to LA because there's a lot of questions about, what did you learn in addition to that in LA? And because that would be a completely different animal. And why'd you go there? Which is curious what you're going to say. But let's go back to the beginning. Okay. So you're not in radio. You're presumably some sort of a kid. How did you get into radio? I have asked this from everybody that I've interviewed, and no one has given the same answer twice yet. So how about you?
I remember the exact moment, actually, I got interested in radio, and I would have been maybe 6 or 7 years old. And my mom and dad were out, and we were left with a babysitter. And the babysitter left me alone. And my mom and dad had one of those old cabinet radios. And it had an acoustic grill on the front. And we were in Scotland. So you could tune around short wave, medium wave bands. And you could hear all these different languages from all over Europe. Italy would come booming in and Germany. And I just thought it was fascinating. So, I'd be tuning around and listening to it. And I'd look through this grill and the old vacuum tubes through the grill in my childish mind looked like buildings with lights on in the distance. And so I'd be listening to these foreign languages and looking at these in my mind at these cities far away in Europe. And you remember, this is the 60s. So, there were still remnants and scars of the Second World War and what had happened in Europe. And, there were my grandmother's house still had a bomb shelter in it and all that kind of stuff. So I just
Wow.
found it fascinating that I could travel around the world through radio. I just loved it. I fell in love with the medium there and then. As time went on and you develop other interests, I didn't think about it as much until my parents moved us a lot when we were kids. We'd moved to Canada by then. And my high school, Stephen Leacock, had a television program, and we used the audio booth as a radio station. And I ran into this guy. It was my first day at the school, brand new neighborhood. I remember this guy, Jamie Anderson. I spotted him across the auditorium, and I thought, he's one guy I know from my junior high school in North York. So I latched onto him, and Pat, I was a really shy kid, like the shyest kid you could imagine, multiplied by 10, like such an introvert, terrified.
Wow, I can't imagine that at all.
Terrified of everything and everyone. So I latched onto this guy. And in the first week, the morning announcements would come on TV. And that was produced like a television show. Guys like Mike Myers graduated from there. My great buddy, Dan Gallagher, who's long gone now, sadly. But so we had these people that would go to the school for this TV program. I didn't know anything about it. We just stumbled on it. And my buddy Jamie, my new friend, said, hey, I'm going downstairs to join Radio Leacock at lunch break. And I said, Radio Leacock? What the hell is that? Well, they have a high school radio station. I'm like, I would never in a million years go on the radio. But I went to the meeting because I was too afraid to be left alone in the halls. Then I discovered, because they had an old announcer's booth, that you needed a two-man team. One guy's going to work the board, and I had what I thought was a massive vinyl collection at the time. I had like 30 albums, and I love music. And he wanted to be the announcer. So I'm like, that's great. I will play. I love technical stuff. I'm the guy gazing through the grill on the radio, right? I'll operate the board, and you do the talking. So we signed up, learned how to operate the equipment. And our first show, song ended, I cued Jamie, and nothing. He froze. I cued him again. Jamie, okay, hit the second turntable. Bring up the fader. All right. What are you doing, Jamie? Come on. We're in the basement of the school, man. No one can see you. You can be anybody you want to be. Just turn on the microphone, see whatever you want. Think of how cool that is. Well, if you think it's so easy, why don't you do it? And I did.
Wow. Okay. There's another amazingly different start. Yeah, that's cool. So from there, you obviously would have done that for a while, and then at some point you would have gotten a job at some little station somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And that's the typical,
Yeah, one of our teachers, Howard McLean, had the television teacher, because I took the TV program in grade 11 once it was available to me, and I graduated with a 100% exam. That's how much I loved TV and radio. And I knew this is what I wanted to do. Even speaking into a camera as a shy kid wasn't real to me. It was a fantasy. So I loved looking into the lens of the camera and doing the high school announcements or whatever program we were doing. So Howard McLean worked part-time at CKEY Radio. He did the news on the weekends. And so he had a friend named Robert Payne who was doing news during the week. And Robert had just started a little talent agency. So Howard had me go down to the old CKEY headquarters on the top floor of the Toronto Star building, number 1 Yonge Street. I was just in awe, Pat, to look around and go, wow. I remember you got off the elevator, they had two floors, and a big stairway that went up to the majestic second floor with the studios. I'm a high school kid, and I'm in these CKY studios. That was my dad's radio station. So I'm there meeting Robert Payne, this big voice guy who was doing the news. And I brought my demo tape, and he sent it out. And I had a couple of interviews. I wanted to be a DJ, though. I wanted nothing to do with news. I wanted to play music and talk. I wanted to be Dan Williamson from CFDR was my idol at the time.
Yeah.
I wanted to be that guy. But Howard said, put a newscast on anyway, because in small markets, you might have to read the news.
For sure.
So I got turned down by a few radio stations, and I took the trip by train up to New Liskeard, Ontario, CJTT, and they had an opening for a news director. And the program director said, do you know anything about news? And I did what you do at that age when you're looking for a job. I lied. And I said I did. And he liked my newscast. So I had 2 weeks. I went to the library. I found every book on broadcast journalism I could get my hands on. the Canadian Press Broadcast News Style Guide, the CBC Style Guide. I learned how to use the pyramid and the reverse pyramid to write story. I did all of that stuff on my own. And when I got there in 2 weeks, I kind of knew how to put together a newscast. So I was the evening reporter, the morning news anchor, and the news director of a one-man newsroom.
That's a heck of a start for out of the gate. Oh yeah, I'm the news director. What?
That didn't mean much. I was only director.
No, for sure. Yeah, yeah. So you're in a small market, and presumably because you have such a long career, we're going to kind of jump through this, fairly quickly and get into Toronto era and beyond. But you definitely were for sure at one small market, maybe a couple different small market stations. Usually, sometimes people pick up stuff at small markets that stays with them. Sometimes it's negative stuff, and it's like, oh man, I don't want to be doing that, or I don't want to be that guy, or whatever. And then other things where you just learn something and it resonates and it keeps coming. Anything from that era, that time when you were in the smaller markets that stick out, that stuck with?
One thing for sure stood out. I remember we used to broadcast the Senior A hockey games. And the program director said, I want you to be the announcer for the show. So you're going to do the introduction. We went into the studio to record it. And he said, there's no energy there. I thought I was giving it my all, right? Yeah, it's pretty flat. And he said something that stuck with me all these years later. He said, in radio, if you think you're giving it a 10, it comes out of the speaker as a 4. He said, I don't know why. It's like some giant filter. Maybe it's because you can't see the person. They're not animated. But your 10 is their 4. So I want you to give me a 20 to get to their 10.
Yeah.
And I actually learned that later in my years at Q107 when I had been there for a while and almost got fired and realized my 10 was their 2 and I had to step up my game. Actually, throughout my career, every time I've gone to another level, I've realized that I'm not as good as I thought I was, and I have to push it harder. I have to more animated, more dynamic, more. And even at this point in my career, sometimes I hear a tape and go, I've slipped back. I thought I was giving it a 10. I'm actually giving it an 8. So tomorrow I'm going for a 12. So that stuck with me. That idea of radio filters out energy.
Yeah, that is a fantastic. God, I wish I would have heard that ages ago. When you're doing air checks with people and stuff, and when you're the PD, I can't tell you how many times trying to explain, you need to pick this up, You mentioned Dan Williamson. Dan was cool when I was the PD at the Mix for the first time there. He, for those watching, Dan Williamson at one point I think did almost every national commercial coast to coast in Canada. He was on everything, every big product, every big company, whatever. He did them all. So he was like a machine. So he's doing afternoon drive at the time, and I just walked in. I said to Dan, he goes, "Yeah, what's up? Give me 20% more." Okay. I just walked out. That's all I had to say. And he just, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's good. But yeah, wow, that's huge advice to get from a small market too. Interesting person, would know enough to tell you that. Really cool. Yeah.
And Yorkville Shopping Center sometime after that when he got out of radio. But yeah, it stuck with me.
Wow. I'm stunned that you can actually remember these people's names that far back.
I'm a little surprised too, actually. They come out of my mouth.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I go back and say, hey, I can't remember the guy's name. So let's jump ahead to Toronto. I'm not sure if you started, if you jumped into Toronto radio or you jumped into Toronto TV, because I knew you had a TV stint where you were doing, TV news and stuff. Which came first?
Some small market radio stuff. Probably my biggest learning curve was CJBK in London because it was a very competitive market at the time. And I got hired to do evening news. So that put a lot of polish on my newscasting ability and my writing ability. Gord Harris was news director there at the time. Great teacher. Worked at Fanshawe College as a professor as well. So he was very blunt, very... he could be quite intimidating, but I learned a lot from him. Great writer, just one of the best news writers you'll ever hear. A guy named Andy Oudman was there at the time as well. CKLW, when you were there, I tried to steal him. He was the most creative writer and user of tape in his newscast that I ever heard. So I learned a lot at that market. Then I went off and did some TV reporting in Peterborough for a while. But I came back home to Toronto because at some point, when you're young, you think it's been an eternity. It's been 4 or 5 years. I'm 25, man. I got to get back to Toronto. I was the program director of the station out in Oakville, CHWO. And I heard that CFRB was hiring a weekend newscaster. So I sent the tape and I got an audition. I came into the CFRB newsroom. So I'm news director and program director at CHWO. I'm still a young guy. And they sit me in the newsroom and I realize I'm in this big tartan chair. And the news director plunks down some newspapers and he says, I'll give you 30 minutes, write me a 5-minute newscast. No tape, just you. Got 30 minutes. And I look and a guy named Bob Heskett, big name guy, was sitting next to me. And he said, don't be intimidated, but I will tell you that's Gordon Sinclair's chair. I'm a kid literally sitting in Gordon Sinclair's chair, tartan chair, next to Bob Heskett, and I'm writing a newscast. And I've got 30 minutes to do it. I read the newscast, and I don't audition well. I never have, because I'm still that shy kid. Yeah. When I got to LA, my first 2 weeks, terrible radio. Awful. The first time I got to fill in as a host at CFRB, the program director called me and said, you didn't say anything. Terrible auditioner. I need time to get my legs under me. But I read a fucking great audition at CFRB. It was awesome. I walked out, I knew it. I drove home. I wasn't even 10 minutes from the station where I lived. The news director already left the voicemail. He said, I need you tomorrow morning to do the weekend news. Yeah. So I did that for a while until I heard there was an opening at Q107 for an afternoon news anchor. So I sent my tapes there. And that's a whole other story we can get into about what it takes sometimes to get hired when you get a no the first time, because I got a flat out no when I first sent the tape to Q107. But as you know, I eventually got a yes.
And did they tell you why you got to know? I'm curious. I mean, what immediately comes to mind is new style of CFRB, news station, and then
well, that was the first thing. Right? You're too CFRB.
Okay, yeah, full blown rocker. I mean, you'd have to definitely jack it up a bit and all that sort of different writing and all of that.
Yeah, again, type of thing. I'm giving it a 6, but it's coming out of 2, and Q107 now it sounds like a -2. So. They didn't tell me why. Gene Velitis was the news director. They used to do their news at 20 after to bury it in ratings, right? Yeah. So, but Gene Velitis was one of the most conversational news anchors I've ever heard. I used to listen to him in the morning before I'd go on the air in Oakville. And he was the news director, and he just flat out said, no, we're not interested. But I said, Gene, if I could change one thing, what would it be? And he talked about the energy thing. Way more energy. So I went into the studio right away, made a demo with more energy, sent it to him. He said, well, like I said, we're going to go a different route, but it was better. I said, well, what else would you change? I think I reached out to him about 6 times. We're still friends. He says, I hired you to just make you shut up. I just knew you wouldn't go away. And then I got hired, not for the main job I wanted. Kathleen Rankin was hired to do afternoon drive, but they needed a contributor to Barometer, my introduction to talk, 3 days a week, and weekend news anchoring in the mornings and afternoon. It was a split shift. So again, I'm on the air for 2 weeks now. Pat, I have to tell you, Q107 signed on when I was in high school. I wanted to work there desperately, and I'm killing it. Until Gene Velitis comes in and says, Gary Slade heard you. He thinks you suck.
For those watching, Gary would have been at that time with the PD, essentially the owner of the station, son of the owner. Ultimately, end up running the whole company into a
his dad had already left and owned RB by then, so I was working for his dad at CFRB, and Gary was left behind to kind of, I think he agreed to stay for a year to give them a transition period. And Gary, as you know, can be pretty blunt. And, and really annoying because he's often right. So that's, one of the worst combinations you can find in a boss. Yeah. Blunt and often right. Again, it's that the energy just wasn't there, but I didn't want to get fired. So I doubled down. And even at that, I remember thinking, okay, now I'm killing it. And I got called in to do my first weekday morning fill-in. And I'm on the air, Pat, and I'm feeling great. We opt our own newscast then at Young and Bloor, 30th floor, overlooking the whole city. I'm king of the world. This is a dream come true. And I'm reading the newscast, and I've got the energy, and I've got the witty writing style. I'm firing all my own cards, and it's sounding great. And then I look at the guy next to me, and I say, and now with Q107 Sports, here's John Gallagher. He turned on the microphone and blew me out of the room. It was unbelievable. Again, I think I'm a 10. This guy's a 50. He is so loud and so energetic, and his writing is so witty and creative, and I think I'm sitting looking at him and thinking, my God, I suck. I am terrible. And so again, you think now you've got nothing left to give. I was probably 50% better by the time I introduced him for the next newscast, because I reckon I'm out of my depth here. I'm not as good as I think I am. I gotta get better, or I'm not going to survive. And that's the great thing about when you jump into a major market and you think you're really good and you realize you're not good enough at all. And these guys are here for a reason, and you better step it up or you're not going to last.
It's amazing that you could actually hear the difference, because I've met so many guys starting out within the first 2, 3, 4 years where their ear isn't even acclimated to be able to notice that difference. Other than somebody really screaming and they're being quiet, but I mean all the other nuances. They just inflections and other things are just not part of their ear yet. So pretty cool that you could actually get that and actually do something about it quickly. Very neat.
I think that's how you survive and succeed, right? You have to have the ability. As much as I would always push back on you, I don't want to hear a tape. Just tell me what you heard. It's because I know that as critical as you are, I'm going to hear 10 more things that I don't like. Right. And it's going to throw me off, right? I can't absorb too much. I need, give me that one thing to work on. And then next week, give me a few more. But I don't want to be overwhelmed, because I can be so self-critical that I can be paralyzed by it. So it's a balancing act of being self-aware enough to know you need to learn, but not being pushed down too far where you kind of go back into your shell and you can't be as good as you need to be.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about Q and what it was like working there, and anything that you would have, learned in addition to this that would have, pushed your career along. In other words, made you better. So that part, but also the part about just simply being at Q. Like, when I got to Toronto, I knew about Q. I didn't know who Gary was, initially. And there's a mystique about Q, about what went on in the building and how everybody was, but I only get to this day just glimmers of that. All true. Yeah, really. Yeah.
All true.
The craziness and the good parts.
I go in for one of my first air checks with someone who wasn't Gene, and the program director lights up a joint to have the conversation.
Okay, then here we go. Yeah, rock station. Why not? Sure.
I'm in a very different environment right now. No, it was truly. I mean, it's all kind of legendary, and every bit of it true. It was crazy. It was fun. You had brilliant people. I look at the lineup of people I worked with back then, all just incredible. Even if it wasn't known as a news department, I mean, Kathleen Rankin is just one of the finest newscasters you'll ever hear. Gene Velitis, so talented in so many different ways, so creative, so good at what he does. Jane Houghton taught me how to do interviews. I mean, that woman could read 5 books a day and interview the authors and then go on and do 5 more the next day. She taught me about that, how to ask the right questions. And it was like going to the best university you could ever go to, surrounded by really successful people. But at the same time, we were annoyed by Gary, who would make us hang out once a week at Rock and Roll Heaven, the bar. It was down in the basement at Young and Bloor. It always felt that it was kind of mandatory, but then we'd go and have the best time. We were a tight team. Everybody knew each other well. We all loved each other. We all got in trouble together. And I got my first real taste of celebrity, because I'm a Toronto kid at Q107, and I go from being Bill Carroll, a name that Gary gave me one day out of nowhere. I don't like McCarroll. You're not McCarroll, you're Bill Carroll from now on. Okay? I guess it's that, or I'm unemployed. That was the impression I got. But I went from being Bill Carroll to being Bill fucking Carroll, man. You're Bill fucking Carroll from Q107, man. Oh, that's so cool. And you're backstage at every concert. and now you're interviewing. I had one-on-one interviews with people like Phil Collins, and Joe Walsh is walking the hallways on any given day. And for a music lover like me who wanted to get into the radio business just for music, I was doing news, which I was good at, but in an environment that was about music, which I loved. So it was I will never work anywhere that I will have enjoyed more than that. Those almost 10 years there, magical.
It's funny when you were mentioning, Bill fucking Carroll. I've had this conversation about Gary with other people, especially the general managers at the time. And if you're watching right now and you're a PD or you're a general manager, or it's just somebody who's running a company of any sort, really. Gary, who was the PD, then became the general manager. I think he was PD and general manager at Q. And then, the CEO of a billion-dollar company. He had some sort of an ability to make it seem like you were, you had Teflon on you and you could pretty much do anything. Like you're almost invincible. I had that as a GM in the company, like the company is invincible and we're just on a different plane, different level than you people, and somehow he instilled that. I don't actually know how, but to me, it was definitely if you're management somewhere and you're over top of people, it's something to strive to actually be able to pull that off. But it's, obviously he did it there, and he did it, even as he went up the rungs. I found that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time talking about Gary because I never got the impression. I ran into him. Andy Kim, a good friend of mine, was being inducted into the Music Hall of Fame, and I ran into Gary a couple of weeks ago. And I never got the impression he liked me. And it's just, I don't think he and I ever had a very good personal connection. Obviously, you can hear how I talk about the stations that he ran, that I have that respect for his ability to identify talent and put together a great radio station. And boy, he knew a great song the minute he heard it. All of that stuff is true, but I never, I feel I had a personal connection with you when we worked together, and I can pick up the phone and I feel comfortable with you right now. With him, even at this event a couple of weeks ago, it's all very awkward, and he takes shots at me, I take shots back, and it's just a weird situation with. I don't think he likes me, and yet he always hired me. He hired me at Q, even though he sort of threatened to fire me the first couple of weeks. I stayed there for a long time, and when I was looking for a job and he was at CFRB, he hired me there full time. When a full-time shift opened up as a talk host, he may not have directly, there was a program director, but nothing happened without his approval. He hired me to do that. He gave me a shot in the mornings when I was there. So obviously he has some kind of passing respect for my ability, but we never had that. Just never had that connection.
I could tell you unequivocally, if he hired you twice or more times, which obviously that happened, for sure he would like you. I have, and I worked with him directly for 20 years, really. Being, he's my GM, I'm the PD, and then I'm a general manager, he's the CEO. There's only one step above for 20, and I love the guy, and we get along great, but it's the same sort of he's hard to talk to. It's just I find it I would love to go out and visit his office more, but he's a billionaire, and you get in there good for maybe 10, 12 minutes, and it's like, after all the small talk was out of the way, it's like, I got nothing else because I don't know what he's doing. He's making, $1 million deals, 100 million to this hospital, 50 million to this hospital, and so many other things that you can easily get that impression. But I can tell you for sure, if he's hired you more than once, because, I've seen other things where, he'd blow somebody out and they're never coming back, So, he would like you, probably just, not.
Someone who knows
not the normal.
You guys are maybe too much alike, that you both have that introvert still inside you, but you're forced to talk to a lot of people and have very outgoing kinds of jobs. And maybe we're both a bit awkward, and so the chemistry was never quite right. Or maybe it's like you said, that maybe it's always a bit awkward with Gary. I don't know, but I was there at Q107, had great years at 1010 as well. I mean, there's no way I can complain. I mean, that guy's responsible for probably 80% of my success, right? So
Yeah. Speaking of 1010, which is the call letter, it's the frequency of CFRB. So after Q, it gets sold to another company, WIC, and I'm guessing they probably got rid of some people, downsizing, all that sort of stuff to make up for the debt. Um, did you leave there on your own, or did you get canned? And you end up at CFRB. How did you get to CFRB?
Well, I was still doing the daytime talk shows, which were mandatory back in those days on FM, right? You had to do foreground program.
Yeah.
And then CRCC changed the regulations, and I went in to see the general manager, and I said, "How long until I'm gone?" He said, "No, we're not getting rid of that show. We're keeping Barometer." I thought, okay, so you're probably, I know what you're paying me. You're probably paying my producer $60,000 a year. So this show's costing you 150 or something $1,000. Or you can have Jim James stay on for an extra hour and pay him $3 more. Right?
Yeah.
So I knew where I was headed, despite the denials from the GM. But then the AM station switched to talk. So I did middays. But it wasn't doing particularly well. And they decided to bring in Howard Stern on Q and Dr. Laura on AM 640. And they came to me and they said, here's what we're going to do. If you can get the show to a 5 share in the next year, you can stay. If you don't, we're going to let you go. And I knew immediately what he's doing. He's trying to get me to work out my severance, because severance is money in lieu of notice. I'm getting notice. Mm-hmm. A complicated notice. So I said, well, what if I decide to leave right now? I found out later he wasn't supposed to make this offer, but he said, well, I guess we could just pay you the full severance now. And I said, well, why don't you draw up the paperwork and let me take a look at it? He said, well, we don't have to do that now. I said, no, just so I can go home and talk to my family, and I'd like it in writing. And he said, okay, great. And then when I left the room, I heard later he said, well, I think he's going to take it. You think he's going to take it? Yeah, I think he's going to take it. I went back in an hour later. The paperwork was drawn up. I didn't take it home. I just signed off on the severance, walked out the door. I'm not staying. Right. That lineup you're putting together is not getting to be a 4 or 5 share. Not even close. I'm gone. I took the money. I was on the air part-time because I could work part-time during my severance up to a maximum amount. I was doing weekend news at CFRB maybe a week later, maybe 2. Best year financially I'd ever had up to that point in my career, because I got my full severance package. And I'm making money doing weekends at CFRB. And I knew if I could get in the door as a newscaster, and I've had talk experience, eventually somebody's going to call in sick, and they're going to look up and down the hall and go, well, Carroll's done a talk show. And that's what happened. A little bit at a time, filling in, taking over, and eventually squeeze my way into a full-time show there.
Steve Couch, the PD at that time, that brought you over, or was it?
No, he'd been there and was in Montreal, came back later. But no, it was Bob Makowitz, who I'd worked for at Q107.
At Q, yeah. Funny how the same station people keep going around in a circle. So ultimately you end up getting your own talk show. I mean, when I got there, you were just transitioning. The period is hazy for about the first year I was there. It was so much going on. And when I came back from out west as the GM, but ultimately you were 9 to noon. That's what really sticks in my mind at first, before doing mornings. Were you doing another shift before that, like doing just a nighttime show or something like that?
No, I was doing, they used to have like a 9 to 10 panel discussion.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So I was news director and I was hosting that. And I remember that went up until at least 9/11, because that's what I was doing on the day the buildings collapsed. I was getting ready for that 1-hour show, and I was still in the news department. So sometime after that, it became 9 to noon when the host left. But
right. When here's where we kind of get into types of radio talk shows and different ones, because I think you would know better than me. Talk radio itself has gone through a bunch of different iterations. There's the ones where everybody's pleasant and they're just talking and they're just taking calls, and it's all over the place. And then there's other ones where it's like you're like this with the audience, going at it, and taking calls, and then there's the CBC PBS type of way of doing it. When you were doing 9 to noon, I think when you really started to hit stride as an entity, I know who he is. I like him. I hate him. That's what I mean by as an entity. Your brand, I guess. You were in this, kind of in this mode. Would you agree, or with the audience, kind of, it
I think so.
every
I think
every topic was a battle.
radio transitions, and then you just change as a person too over time. And to me, the best talk radio is authentic. So don't get too far away from who you actually are, because the audience can smell it, right? You can't lie to them every day. It's too hard to keep up that facade. So yeah, I've changed and evolved as a person. I've changed and evolved as a human being. But back then, we did a lot of open line radio, and I like to take the callers on one by one at a time. I had this conversation with Steve Couch once. He said, "You're too combative and you're too loud and too noisy, and you got to chill it out." Now, again, I think that's partly right. What I've learned is great radio is dynamic. So, if you're at a dinner party and I'm yelling at you about Donald Trump for an hour, you're going to leave and say, "I'm not going back." But if I yell at you about Donald Trump for 5 minutes and in a way that you think is kind of interesting and informative, and boy, that guy's got a lot of energy, and then I make you laugh, and then I lean back a little. Our program director in LA used to talk about leaning forward, sitting up straight, and leaning backwards. It's got to be all three. Leaning forward is, I'm leaning in. "Oh, caller, you can't actually believe that. Come on. I know you're making that up, because no person in their right mind would know that. Okay, let me give you some more information, though, about what the president actually said. Hey, the funniest thing happened to me last weekend." And you can see I'm leaning back more as I go, and I change the attitude. Great talk radio is all of those. So, that's something over the years I've learned. I was probably too intense, too much for too long. But that's also who I was. I have opinions on everything, and I'm feisty. And so I remember having this argument with Steve Couch, and we were live at the CNE. We're right inside the Prince's Gates. And he was, be nicer to the callers. And so I started to do, you and I had a moment like this when I tried to prove a point too. I don't know if you remember, but I set up. So I'm being laid back, and people are walking by, an occasional person would wave. "Oh, there's Bill Carroll from the radio, Bill Carroll." Then I took a call, and I said, as I'm taking the call, "Watch this." Take the call, and I pick a fight with this guy. Man, I'm on him. And within 2 minutes, Pat, there's a semicircle of 50 people around us. Everybody stops to watch. Fans, not fans, they all want to see what's going on. I said, don't tell me people don't want to hear an argument. Look at the crowd.
Yeah.
When hockey people will say, we don't need fighting in hockey. Nobody likes fighting, but everybody stands up to watch. But that doesn't mean I want to watch all fighting for 60 minutes, though.
Yeah.
So the lesson he learned, I think, from me is some talk radio, when you're head to head, as you described it, is great talk radio. What I learned is not all of it, though. Back off. Let them see you have another side. And that's morning talk radio to me. That's where that's really important. Everyone in Ottawa, when I'm out and around, your 7 a.m. sound off tonight, Bill, this morning, Bill, was great. Or I really agreed with you. I really disagreed with you. Everyone remembers that. And then they say, man, you make me laugh in the morning. You can be so funny. That's the combination I want.
Yeah. Here's one. When you started, this and arguing with people, was that the introverted person of you coming out of your shell, or is that like another person that's doing radio guy? You know what I mean? And I don't mean it's not the real you. I mean, one is you kind of really changing yourself. Then the other is sometimes you have to be somebody before you have to make believe you're somebody before you actually become somebody on the radio. You know what I mean?
Question. That is completely my DNA. My father was 5 feet 5 inches tall, as introverted as I was. But if you stepped on his toes, or you stepped on the toes of someone he cared about, in a flash, he turned. There was no one he wouldn't stand up to. I've gotten myself in trouble with management many times over the years because I can't help myself. If I feel there's an injustice to me or to someone else, I cannot help it. I have to say it. Consequences be damned. I mean, that's just in me. I get it directly from him. I see it now in my son and daughter that's there as well. And I, like a good father, go, yeah, there's a time and place for that, though. Sometimes you need to take a deep breath and count to 3. Probably not good to lose it on Pat Holiday in his office every day because he does get to decide your future. So, be more measured. But no, that's all
It,
me. When I'm out with friends, some nights I'm the funniest guy at the table. Other nights I'm just listening, because I used to tell my students at Seneca, I never learned anything by talking. I know everything I know. I learn by listening. So sometimes I'm in
yeah,
listening mode. What are people thinking? What do they know I don't know? Maybe information gathering. No, they're all facets of me. But as a performer, you learn to turn them on, right? I don't wake up at 5 a.m. and go, can't wait to take the prime minister on today. I'm like everybody else. Some days I go, I don't even want to go on the radio. I just want to sit and watch the birds fly by. But I don't have that option, right? I have to turn it on. So
yeah,
you're
yeah.
taking yourself and you're magnifying it for people.
You and I had a conversation in my office, and it's one of those things that just stuck, and I just found it fascinating because it was like, to me, 6, 7 steps deeper into actually being a talk show host than I had ever heard. And then that was including me being the PD of CJND in Montreal, on a big, huge news talk station. So now I'm managing another one, right? And I thought, okay, I got the hang of it. You started to go through the specifics of something, which I'm going to tell you, and then ask you to kind of explain what was going through your head. Sorry, I'm kind of weaving all over the place
Hope I
here.
remember what I said that day.
Yeah, no, I think you will. I'll remind you a little bit. You were describing to me how you handle the hour, watching the call screen, and having to battle to win the topic no matter what. And I'll give you an example of that. There's a topic, you're on something, and it's a half hour. You're 10 minutes into it. You've got position A, and somebody else comes up with position B, which blows you out of the water. At which point, you got 20 more minutes now. What do I do with that? With that 20 minutes? But you have the call screener and the producer with lines of the general idea of what this person is going to say. And I remember you saying, well, I can't take this person because I'm done. I'm going to hold this person. I'm going to hold this person down to the end, and then let them win. And okay, let's go to the news and goodbye. That kind of thing. And I just thought that that was fascinating and amazing. Probably good talk people can do this. You're arguing with somebody and readjusting the hour as you're watching the screen at the same time, and trying to figure, where do I put where? You're kind of like programming music, except it's not music, on the fly.
Yeah, you're doing
with the feel of it all to keep the thing going. And
that's that thing I'm talking about, though, with the leaning forward, sitting up straight, leaning backwards, that nobody wants to hear a guy yell for a full hour. So knowing when you got to change. So when I'm doing open line radio, which I haven't really done in a long time now, but it's no different if I'm using guests or bringing in contributors or playing sound bites. It's the same thing. It's like writing an essay in high school. You open by stating your case, and then you got to make your case. And then at the end of the hour or half hour, however long you're going, and you got to know in your mind about how long this should take to do it well. Then you restate your case at the end, you wrap it up, you move on to the next thing. So I'm using those calls. I'm looking at the call screener, and a good call screener gives me enough information. I can really, this person's going to argue with me. This person's going to argue with me. These are going to agree with me. So I'm going to mix those up. This person I'm going to fight with. This person, oh, that's an interesting point. I've got a joke about that. Or that person's got an interesting point. I have a personal story where I was involved that I can tell as a result of that. So I'm looking at all of that, and then I'm saying, okay, now, while talking on the air, I'm thinking, what's the order I'm going to put them in? And that may change as I go because something unexpected comes up. But yeah, and I'm always surprised when I'm not anymore, but I used to be surprised when I talk to other hosts and say, think about that. Well, maybe that's why your show's not very good. Because to me, that's the basic. To me, that's fundamental. You've got to be operating at that level. But what I hear, which is not very good talk radio, is they make their case, they take a couple of calls. After each one, they say, thank you for the call, they hang up. Now you got a bunch of callers who don't have much to add, or they'd be the prime minister probably, or they'd be hosting a freaking show if they were so entertaining. Some of them can be experts, right? But they're just taking a call and saying, yeah, thank you. And they're taking the next call and the next call. They go to commercial break, they come back, restate the same point. Whereas I save something deliberately in my argument. And I may save it for that guy who's got me on that point. And sometimes I'm waiting. I've got the counterpoint to it though. Next level. He hasn't gone this far yet in the argument because I have another fact that I saved here for this moment. Now I come back from the commercial break, especially it's going to be a tough caller. I'm going to come back when I'm fresh. I've had 3 minutes to relax. I'm going to take him right away. I'm going to deal with him, going to blow him out of the water. It's going to get the phones going all over again. It's going to revitalize the topic, but I'm going to add new information to the listener because ultimately you're entertaining, but you're also informing, right? That's part of the reason you're there.
Sure.
Provoke thought and conversation and give people information. So this is a way I can bring in that new fact in a way that's going to serve the show and serve my argument. So yeah, to me, that's always going on at all times. I'm thinking of that every minute I'm on the air. And when I'm not, it's because I'm being lazy and I'm having a bad show. And I know, and it happens, right? The only difference between now and maybe 20 years ago is I can usually save a bad show 2 minutes in because I go, wow, I really suck right now, man. Like you got to pick it up. Is that
that's amazing?
About that?
Yeah, I found that that conversation and you explained even more now. That was to me just a huge revelation of what you need to have going on in your head to do a good talk show. And for this specifically, I've watched a bunch of Charlie Kirk videos because he's kind of doing a talk show with the people standing in front of him.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
And
like an open line show, but live.
How much of that is he doing now? Is he running through and he's got a show going in his head and he's orchestrating it as he's talking to this person because it sort of seems like he does when you watch his face, watch his eyes and, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and he used a lot of the same kind of rhetorical arguments that I like to use when I did open line radio as well. I kind of recognize all of that when I would watch him. I suspect he learned it by doing it. He was out there every day and he got better and better at it. And that's kind of unfortunately how most talk radio happens is that you have to learn it the hard way. There doesn't seem to be the time, the resources, even the expertise. Talk radio format just kind of, we had a version of it with our FM shows, but Rush Limbaugh invented it with just a DJ with something to say. So the whole format, it never really had, I don't think companies put the kind of research and energy into finding out what works and what doesn't so that you can find those shortcuts and learn the craft. No one's really teaching it. So I suspect he learned it just through osmosis. And even now, I think, there are people like me who've been doing it a long time, probably could help a lot of young people do it better. Now they probably want to do a podcast, but it's the same thing. Podcasts are exactly talk radio. They're just, and every version of it, right? Like you said off the top, the CBC version of it, the serious investigative journalism, the documentaries that are more PBS style, and then you got the crazy guys, the bro talk radio that just off the wall and combative. And it's all the same thing.
I think politics is, certain parts of politics are in that same realm too. You're up in front of, you're taking things from reporters and, it's like taking callers. How do I stay on point and, and answer their questions and still win the topic, at the end, probably somewhat similar to that. I was going to ask you another question. Let me jump ahead, but you just said something. What do you think has to be part of the person initially to actually be a decent talk show host or a decent podcaster or that kind of stuff? I'll throw the first one out because I instantly attribute it to you. You seem to me, and a few other people that I would say are good talk show people can do talk well. You are immensely curious, seems to me. And therefore, you can ask a million questions like nonstop. Seems like maybe it's prep, maybe it's not. It doesn't seem to be prep. You're just curious on something and just keep digging.
Yeah, I mean, my wife jokes that she's never seen a set of encyclopedia that looks thumbed through everywhere you look at it. And this is before Google, of course. But I'm the guy who has to look it up. The minute I hear something, I didn't know that. I need to learn more. And that, yes, absolutely. You can't fake that. We've had experience. We've tried guys out over the years where they've got some issue that they're really passionate about. They come in, they do a great talk show. And then you go, okay, but guess what? City Hall just announced this is happening. You need to do at least a half an hour on it. Well, I don't know anything about that. Then it's not going to work for you. You have to know a little bit about a lot of things. My boss said to me today in the after show meeting, he said, I love it when you interview ordinary people and then I hear you ask these questions I never thought of. But the minute I heard the question, I thought, I really want to know the answer to that. It's because I'm listening. You know that most talk show hosts, they've got their 4 or 5 questions written down and they're going to ask them. And now they're interviewing politicians who are so well trained, they're going to give you the 5 answers, even if you don't ask the 5 questions. So unless you're really listening and engaging with them, some of my favorite questions, listen, don't kid yourself. I know I got 3 or 4 points I have to make with this guy and I'm going to get these questions in. But the best questions come from listening and you go, well, explain to me how that works because I hadn't thought of that. That's when you get the magic is by listening to what they're telling you and just digging a little bit deeper. So curiosity, I think, is number 1 for sure. I was on the air at KFI. I'm interviewing Carlos Santana, which is pretty cool. And I love when a guest will say, no one ever asked me that before. Like, think of how many interviews this guy must have done in his life.
Yeah.
You know what the question was? When did you start sounding like Carlos Santana? Because I can hear one note and I know it's you. When did that happen? He said, wow, that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that.
Yeah.
And the answer was when he stopped trying to sound like everybody else. He said, one day I realized, why am I trying to play it like this guy? I'll just play the note.
Yeah.
I don't try to sound like anything. I just play the note. And that's when people start to say, you have a distinct sound.
Well, on that same note then for you, you're at this point, you have done talk a pretty fair amount and you are doing mornings. Just before we jump to KFI in Los Angeles, you're doing mornings on RB, legendary news talk radio station. At what point along the way did you realize I'm good at this? I'm good at this and I can pretty much probably keep doing this forever and be really successful at it. Somewhere along the way, that must have struck you in some way. Do you remember where, or has it always been, which some people have? Well, God, I'm always looking over my shoulder, like maybe this is not going to last long. But I suspect you would be like, no, I'm good at this.
Too. I don't feel that way. I've never felt that way. I've never felt that I'm good enough. Never. I wake up every day and feel like an imposter. I ran into somebody at a party recently who works in the Prime Minister's office, very close. And when he said, this was the previous Prime Minister, oh my God, when your voice comes on the radio in the car, he gets so furious. And I thought, who am I to tell the Prime Minister that he's doing a good job or bad job? I'm just some kid from Scarborough and Coatbridge, Scotland. Who do I think I am? It's imposter syndrome. But I think that's why I've succeeded. It's not because I'm great. It's because I'm always trying to get there, and I never quite make it. And sometimes I'm aware, man, I'm in the zone. Like this is as good as I could be at this moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm not. But no, I've never been satisfied. I still feel like I have stuff to learn and grow, and I could do better. And I was better 2 years ago than I am today because I'm not in that KFI competitive environment anymore. So I have to push myself because I don't feel anything to push me. I have a boss who I dreamed of my whole life who just like, you know more about talk radio than I know. Just do your thing, man. And the ratings here have been 10 years of just unbelievable numbers. Like every book I hit bonus, but just been incredible. He's just leaving me alone. I always wanted that. But then I think, but who's here to push me now? I still need that. Right. And then I have to push myself and I have to learn on my own. And I have to go out of my way to listen to some other people and pick up some things and go, yeah. Oftentimes I used to do that and I've stopped. So I bet I should reincorporate that. So I miss that. I think that's how honestly, Pat, I've worked with people along the way who have twice the voice, twice the talent, twice the charisma, knowledge that I do. And I think I'm still here and they're long gone because I just never thought I was as good as they were. And they thought they were better than they actually were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's a powerful motive. Yeah. I've worked with more than a few people who would be the same, in the same thought process is that this could end at any moment. And actually, I worked for a manager who told me that, once when we were, well, actually, he was smoking a joint. I wasn't at the time, but it was like, wow, I can't believe that you just told me that. Because you'd expect the person over you to kind of, have a grasp of everything and really know what he was doing, at least feel that way. And he didn't. And it was like, wow, holy, okay, thanks. And it wasn't who you're probably thinking of, that GM. But anyway, it's a powerful motivator. You see that with movie stars and stuff a lot. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm going to be your analyst here or something, like I'm Jordan Peterson or something, doing the psychology question. KFI then, given everything you just said, the KFI job comes up and you were doing it part-time a little bit from Toronto. I remember you were doing some shows there.
Yeah.
They let you do it. And then it's like, you get offered a job to go to Los Angeles, KFI, huge, awesome, award-winning talk show station in the US. What pushed you to do that? I mean, one would be, I want to see if I can prove myself. One would be, I deserve this. One would be some other, there's a million mental reasons why you would want to do it. So what was the one that pushed you over the edge? Why did you want to do it?
Remember my dad, who's meek and quiet until you step on his toes?
Yeah.
That's the guy that moved to Los Angeles. I loved doing mornings at 10:10. And I had always kind of wanted to see, could I play in the big leagues? You put me on to KFI in a meeting one day. You brought in a bunch of their promos and sounders and stuff. And you had identified one of the great strengths of that station at the time is the station itself had a personality. Like, those FM stations, Bob or whatever, where they have the sounders are cheeky and they have an attitude and the station becomes a personality. KFI had that. And that was one of the reasons you identified as a success, and you were encouraging us to produce some of these sounders and stuff. So you got me listening to KFI. That's why it was on my radar. And I'd had conversations with them back and forth, off and on, for a couple of years about it. Not the right shift, not the right fit. My young kids were just being born. I was promoted to doing mornings at 10:10. And then the ownership changed. And one of those assholes who came in from Quebec said, Bill, you're not a morning man. And they moved me 9 to noon. And Pat, nobody tells me where to go and what I can and can't do. And they brought in a consultant who said, well, I heard you this morning, and you can't yell and scream at people like that all morning long. You're not a morning man. I said, well, you're listening at 9 o'clock. And I've actually been asked by the program director to be feisty and take calls at 9 o'clock. Did you listen at 6:30? Everything about that man's demeanor and smell that day told me there's no way he was listening at 6:30 in the morning. So there became this kind of myth that I was yelling and screaming all morning long. We laughed a lot in that morning show. It was way more dynamic than I was getting credit for. I was not going back to 9 to 1, and I will not be disrespected. I picked up the phone. I said, it's time to talk seriously now about this. So I quietly did 9 to noon. I didn't complain. Had fucking awesome numbers, 9 to 1, because I was killing it. Because I knew, nobody knew except my family, I will not be here long. I've already got an immigration lawyer. I've done the application. I'm deep into negotiations with KFI. The minute they took me off that morning shift, I was out the door, but they didn't know it. Hung around, did the best 6 months of radio of my life because I had nothing to lose. And then I packed up and left. And it was the greatest feeling. Then I got there and realized, well, revenge is sweet, but now what the hell am I doing in Los Angeles? How am I going to be a talk radio host in a city I know nothing about? I don't have that. It doesn't matter how much curiosity I have. I don't have the base knowledge to do this show here. So I'd thrown myself into the deep end to make a point. And as I told you earlier, I don't audition well. I don't start well. And I was terrible. I mean, I was doing the worst talk radio, even worse than my first months on the air at Q doing that 1 hour magazine show. I had stepped back of that. I mean, it was brutal, and I knew it, and I knew I was struggling. So it was a battle, but I did get my feet moving under me, and I did catch up, and that show became not just the number one show in the market. I mean, it was number one in LA, my time slot, but also I was outperforming the other shows in terms of my share. So, I did get it there, but it was pretty scary. I had definitely jumped in over my head for sure.
Mm-hmm. And as I recall, and tell me if I'm not remembering it right, we were doing one type of talk radio, and where there are callers and stuff like that. But at the time, KFI, the adjustment would have been that out there you're doing no callers, so it's all you. Basically, you're in today's terms, you're pretty much doing a really killer podcast for the whole, for every topic.
Some KFI shows took the occasional call. It wasn't like no calls, but in a 2 or 3 hour show, you might do one 10-minute segment where you took a couple of calls, but it was not caller oriented at all, not really guest oriented. It was you, pieces of tape, analyzing the news, just riffing, just Rush Limbaugh, right? He was on KFI at the time, 9 to noon. I came on after him. That's really what it was. You had to have a lot to say, and you had to be ready to say it on your own, for sure. That's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, that would be, I would think, a big transition. I was picturing at the time when you were telling me this, like, wow, if you're a music jock and you're used to, you're talking for a couple minutes, music, couple minutes, music, minute, music, 8 seconds, music. Here's 45 minutes, and there's no breaks. You got to fill that. It's like, whoa, big challenge out of the gate.
Many radio hosts these days who take calls and you go, man, this is entertaining. The Lowell Greens of this world who took on the callers and, was always getting himself up before the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council. That's just gone now. People are using calls as a crutch. They don't have enough to say on their own. They'll take some calls to fill the time. The callers have very little say. When was the last time you called somebody? Nobody calls people anymore. They text you, they email you. When I make a phone call to people and they pick up, I'm disappointed. I wanted to leave a message to make it seem like I wanted to talk to them. Now I go back to sending them a text. Like, seriously, I tried it. They asked me to when I moved back to Canada. And I was taking no calls at KFI by the time I was done there. So, let's try taking a few phone calls. And I've been listening to the station for a week when I moved here. I didn't go on the air right away. I was listening to the station. I know all of the 5 callers already. I know who these people are. I remember Walter Sabo had given us some stats one time about how many people call a talk radio show. And it was some tiny percentage, like 5% will ever call in their life. So, you look at your ratings, you go, okay, I got 20,000 people listening right now. What's 5% of that? That's they'll ever call in their life. So what are the odds it's going to be not just in their life, it's going to be this week, it's going to be today, it's going to be this minute. No, it's Jack who's still living in his parents' basement at 50 years old and has nothing else to do. That's the problem. So, but you crutch out on them because you don't have enough to say because you didn't do your homework. You weren't curious enough. You don't have enough facts. You don't have enough stories. You're just going, well, I can hear these people now reading their scripts. They got 10-minute rant. It's all written out. I can hear the paper flip. I don't use a script. I might put a couple of points down, but I just talk. I can hear them. And then I can tell they're out of scripts. You go, well, maybe we'll take a call. Hi, John. Thank you for calling the Rob Smith Show. Well, I just wanted to say that the mayor's wrong when he said, and there's another mistake people make. The show's about me. If I make it about the mayor, they'll call and they'll disagree or agree with the mayor. They're not going to be passionate about it because they think the mayor's an idiot. I want them to think I'm an idiot. That's what I want. I may take the mayor's point of view, but now I'm going to make it my own. I'll tell you why he's right. And in fact, I'll tell you why I would double down on it. He didn't go far enough. Now people are mad at me. That's when I'm going to get good phone calls. Bill, you're an idiot. Yesterday you made such a good point, but today, man, I don't know what you've been drinking. Or, you are so right, Bill, you should be the prime minister. I just quoted the prime minister and agreed with him. But now because I've done it passionately and made it about me, now the whole passion level of the show is 10 times what it would have been. If not, it has to be about the host. That you have to take that cockiness and arrogance and put it out there. And by the way, I don't need 50% of you to love me. I'm not trying to get elected. I'm not the mayor. Like, never hire a guy to do a talk show host who's running for mayor, because that guy's not going to want to offend anyone. I only need, in this market, 10% of the people love me. 2% hate me but listen anyway. I'm killing it, man. I'm number one in the market.
You got a 12 share. Yeah.
Don't hire the person who wants 50% of the people to like them. It's not going to work. No one's going to like you if you're trying not to be hated. You just got to put it out there and develop a thick skin. It took me a while to do that. I developed a thick skin. Then I had to teach the people in my life, my family, my kids. You can go online and read what people say about me that hate me. Just don't tell me about it. I live in a constant state of denial. I don't want to know. Now, I will tell people I trust, if you see a trend, let me know. Like if 10 people today said, I'm tired of hearing Bill Carroll yelling, he needs to calm it down. Okay, there's a trend there. That's not about my opinion. That's about my style. Everyone with a radio is an expert. They all know what they want. I can't survey them all every day and adjust to each individual. But if I see things popping up that are not in my best interest to ignore, then I won't ignore them. So, but I don't need to know what everybody thinks about my opinions. I'm trying to make you mad. So I made you mad? Good, I'm doing my job.
Are there other things that that stick out to you, that you carry forward from KFI that, they had you do, or you saw that you go like, I'm going to incorporate into how I do the show? That would be nice to pass on, because, as I'm talking to you, this is an interview, and it's something that'll be here forever. So, the kids and everybody else can watch this, ages from now, but also people who are, in the business. You have thrown out some amazing gems if somebody is interested in doing a talk show or podcasting, because again, similar, you're into college level here, some of the stuff that you're throwing out here for somebody who wants to learn. Anything else that come up when you were in LA?
One of the managers said to me, "You're already the best broadcaster we've ever had. Like, you get in and out of segments better than anybody, smoother. But that's not all we want from you. We don't want you to be a great broadcaster. Why we hired you is, remember that story you told. You remember the day you offered that opinion. That's who we want. It's great you have the broadcast skills. People here don't. Their morning guy, Bill Handel, terrible radio announcer in every way. Awful voice, terrible formatics, unlistenable in any other format. But man, that guy's interesting. He is so compelling. He says whatever's on his mind. He doesn't care who he offends. He's smart. He's well-read. You know about him a little bit. I'm sure he's a lawyer. Like, the guy, I would sit and watch him. What an education. I'd watch him and go, man, oh man, he's completely fearless. John and Ken in the afternoon, they had a little more broadcast. They came from FM music, but unapologetic. Like, just whatever they're going to say just comes out of their mouth. That's the number one thing I learned. And I've come to the conclusion that because we have different radio histories, they do talk radio different, and I'm going to say better than we do. Our history is CBC and FM magazine shows like me, the one I did. We hired news people who are smart and know the issues. And we put them on the air, and they're afraid because they've been trained not to offer their opinions. They often do subconsciously and don't even realize it, but their biases are still written over them. But they're trying to be journalists. They're trying to sound smart. I hear Canadian talk radio. Everyone is speaking very precisely, and they say the instead of the. It's just the in almost every case. You don't sound smart. You're saying the. That's not how people talk. Talk how people talk. So our history is that we're taking journalism and trying to make it entertaining. They don't give a crap about that. They hired mostly people who just had a lot of things to say and are really colorful in their life of every party, and they gave them a radio show. We'll teach you the radio basics, just so you can get in and out of breaks. We can teach you that. We can't teach the most important thing, and that is your fearlessness, your natural curiosity, your ability to have an opinion on everything. You can't teach that. Hire that man, hire that woman, teach them the basics. We do it the opposite way. Immodestly, I had my IQ tested in order to pick the high school I went to in Scotland. Every student was tested. I went to the number one school, and I was in the top class. I'm fucking smart. I know I'm smart. I don't have to act smart. I don't have to impress you with my vocabulary. I'm smart. I don't try to be smart. I try to be interesting.
Yeah.
You've got to remember a professor from school or high school teacher. They all knew the subject matter. I mean, they had the night to study it before. They had the textbook. They know the subject matter. The ones you learned from were the ones who engaged you, who entertained you. They didn't show they were smart. They were smart. They had the knowledge, but they engaged you and you learned. So that's what I learned from KFI. Don't try to be smart. Don't try to speak properly. You know who does talk radio in Canada better than all the news talk shows? The sports guys. For the same reason, a bunch of ex-jocks. They couldn't speak proper English if their life depended on it. They're right. They've been playing hockey since they were 16. They're all complete morons, but they know the game. And they've spent their entire lives riding around in buses and airplanes, trying to entertain each other, busting each other's balls, being funny, being a smartass. Those guys are great. I watch Overdrive on TV and I listen to it when I'm in the car. You got 3 ex-hockey players, including one who's from a broadcast family. He's the host. He has the broadcast skills, but he's also fearless and opinionated. And the O-Dog, man, I can listen to that guy all day long. He doesn't care if you think he's smart or not. He just goes, don't tell me Willie Nylander's ever going to play defense. He's not going to. He scores goals. If that's not enough, get rid of the guy. And you think, I know that guy's going to run into Willie Nylander at the rink, but he doesn't care. He's saying whatever he wants. How can you not listen to that, Pat? He's KFI. He's only worried about saying what's on his mind and entertaining you. I moved back to Canada. I think, wow, it is so boring here. Talk radio in this country is so monotonous and so predictable. It's terrible. So I go to the sports guys.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of those people. Like I see them all the time on YouTube. There's a woman, I can't remember. She just did an interview for like an hour with Danielle Smith. She's basically doing a show, literally for about an hour every single day. And, it's pretty much just her in a few clips. She's basically doing the KFI thing that you were describing. And she, just no broadcast experience at all, come out of nowhere. I looked down and it's like, oh, there's 280,000 people have watched this. And it's been on for 4 hours only. It's like, whoa. I think a lot of that stuff is unteachable. Just like you either have that or you don't. I don't know how you learn that stuff.
The basic parts of that you can't. You can encourage it as someone who already has it. I used to hear kind of behind my back when I first got to KFI. I'd hear the bosses. Where's that guy? The guy in the hallway. Where's he? We need him on the radio.
Oh wow!
I had to build my courage enough to bring that out. So that too much. It's in somebody. Like, you had great opinions in the hallway about that. And now you're on the air saying, well, I understand that some people may not see it that way, and it's a fair distinction. So I want you to understand I see that. But from the devil's advocate position, we could also, shut up. I could tell you I knew that, but I could do it in common languages and part of a passionate rant rather than just, look how smart I am. This is like one of our 10-minute meetings we used to have that would end up going 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's, I'm sitting here going, oh my God, if you were interested, and I'm not just saying this, but what's running through my mind is you're saying some stuff. It's like, this is like, if you were trying to teach somebody talk, it's like, this is like gems. Like, you're never going to hear this from somebody else, but this is the real shit. You know what I mean? That you'd want to know, and do, including, everything you were just talking about, the KFI in the hallways. I go through that a bunch. Well, here, I'll tell you. I have wanted to do like a political thing of kind of like that woman I was just describing, that's in Canada with Danielle Smith, and because there's specific types of shows that are very much like that they do on YouTube, that there's a couple clips and then they just talk about their impression of it. I'm sure you've seen it. Like, this is what I think. Here's what so and so did when they interviewed whatever, and they do the clips. So the whole thing is like maybe 28 minutes long. 3 minutes is of the clip. The rest is the person. And I've done a bunch of them just to see if I could do it. It's like, yeah, I could do it. I'd love to do it. But you run into, but somebody's going to recognize me. I don't know if I want to be doing this and saying this shit when, and taking that stand out in public I don't know if that's wise. I know I'm going to burn a bunch of friends. I can tell that on Facebook. Being fairly conservative, not
Yeah,
crazy conservative, but fairly conservative. When I see the venom come back at you, that's a big one too. It's like, man, it's a jump to be that guy.
for sure. We have a house on the river here in Ottawa. We have a gazebo down at the
Yeah,
river, and it has curtains and there's a couch, and I could lie there and read. And not everyone can see me from the water, but we become part of the tour, right? So I've never been on the air in one city in one shift, and I'm on TV every day. I'm better known in this city than any other city I've ever been in. So we're part of the tour. That's Bill Carroll's house. Every boat that goes by, that's
yeah.
Bill Carroll's house. And then there's a comment, and sometimes it's, God, I love that guy, man. He's so great. And I just keep reading. Then there are the others who go, what an asshole that guy is. You listen to him, I cannot stand him. He's such an arrogant jerk. That's when I always pop up and go, hello, good morning. And then they turn and they speed off. The boat suddenly goes up on plane and they zip out. You just have to learn, like, if you're going to do that, you will alienate people for sure. And especially these days, politics has gone from kind of being a sport that we could say, no, I'm going to vote Democrat. I think you're wrong. I'm going to vote Republican. And then we'd say, so anyway, did you see the Leaf game last night? And we'd move on. Not anymore. We have tribes, and you cannot disagree with your tribe ever. They're always right. If you're a conservative, Pierre Poilievre is always right. Well, you think he maybe should have pivoted on Trump a little earlier? What are you talking about? No, we're conservative. It's gotten crazy where we are now.
Yeah, it's a friggin' blood sport now.
Yeah.
It is. I'm sure you have a few, but I think I'd probably have max three people who would absolutely be the other side of the spectrum, who I can actually have a total conversation, and they'll agree with some of the things I say, and I'll agree with some of their things, and you end up, all right, what's for dinner? And to just move on. After maybe even 20 minutes of that, maybe even somewhat heated, but all the rest of the people, no way. There's no way you're going to have that conversation. So yeah, that's a big thing. So, I guess that's part of coming out of your shell or whatever that is. If you're going to be doing talk or podcasting and want to be, that guy that I'm describing.
I
Wow.
have a theory, and maybe you were alluding to it earlier when we're going to talk about something like this, but I have this theory that to have the best talk radio host, you'd call them into your office. You're convinced this is the guy or the woman you're going to hire. And you'd say, what's your fuck you amount? For some people, it'd be $100 million. For somebody else, it might be, if I had $1 million right now, I'd be totally happy. Okay, here's the money in advance. Now go be great. But it really is the most important part about being great at this. And that includes friends too. If you really want to do what you're saying you're doing and go on the air and make political commentary, you have to be able to say, I lose friends here all the time. Some of them I know were never really friends because they're kind of more lobbyists and they want to be close to me. But the one day I don't agree with them, they're gone. I have people that I talk to every day for 5 years when I first moved here, would not answer my call tomorrow if I called. They just vanished. Because at some point, I wouldn't agree with their opinion. They were never my friends, Pat, in the first place, right? I'm not doing it just to be provocative. I'm not just some guy on Facebook who's firing up. I do this for a living. So if you don't want to hear my opinions, don't listen. And we can still be friends. But if you expect me to pander to you because we're friends, I'm going to change my point of view on the person you think I should back. Not going to happen.
A good way to look at it. After KFI, we jump ahead to where you are now, which is doing mornings in Ottawa. Was it odd, or did you think much about it, or was like, okay, whatever, just another city? But you're in the capital, and just like you mentioned, the prime minister might get pissed at what you're saying,
Right.
and he's actually hearing it. Did any of that cross your mind, or is it like?
No, after KFI, there was nothing really intimidating. I probably had the best start I've ever had here because now I have so much experience. I've been in the most or second most competitive market in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I've been through the mill. The problem I ran into was the level of talent around me. Not necessarily talking about the people on air. some pretty good people, but the support staff. You know, I'm working with, my producer was Ryan Seacrest's producer before he was my producer. He's a consultant who consults with major talk stations. This guy is making more money than most hosts in Canada would ever make, and he's my producer. So I've got A-level talent. And so I was a little depressed about that. Like, you know, I've been in the big leagues, now I'm in a garage band. Now, I happened to use that expression with a friend who's actually in a band that is massively internationally successful. And I said that to him. And he said, yeah, well, I was in a fucking garage band too. We all were. He said, it's your job to make the garage band an arena band. You've been in the arena, teach them. Get in the garage and jam. Show them how to play the drums. Show them how to play bass. Make them great. He said, it doesn't matter that you're in Ottawa and not LA. There's talent everywhere. You think you're good? Show me you're good. Turn this garage band into a great band. And you know, 6 months later, it was the best team I've ever worked with. Unfortunately, the young guy who was the technical op died of cancer. It was just heartbreaking, but he was the most creative, funny, brilliant guy who added these sound bites and little bits and stuff. Just incredible. He was so good. My producer and I developed a great chemistry. Now the problem is my team is much smaller than it used to be, so it's harder again. But back then I had the team. I just thought they weren't going to be talented enough. But you know what? I found their talents, and I nurtured their talents, and I made them better. And so, you know, get your nose out of the air, Bill. It's Ottawa. It's not Los Angeles. But so what? Whether there's one person listening or 1 million, you got to be great. And you don't go from 1 to 1 million by giving up on it before you even start. So it was great advice I got from a very successful musician, and he was absolutely right.
You know, everybody's got something in them, but you just got to kind of let it out.
I have a
Which is what you did.
Who was really struggling, and they've had meetings with him to tell him what he needs to work on and improve. And I work with them, and I see him on FaceTime. I've got everyone's connected live for the entire 4 hours of the show, but I hadn't met him yet. So I took him to lunch because I said to my boss, did you tell him it's okay to fail? He said, well, but it's not okay to fail. I said, but that's his problem. He's just nervous. So we had lunch. If you fuck up, do it colossally, because greatness doesn't come from not taking risks. I will not be mad at you, and I promise you I won't let the bosses be mad at you if you screw up because you tried to throw in a sound bite that you thought would be funny, but it tripped me up or it tripped up the guest. I will fight for you. But I won't fight for you if you're trying not to make a mistake and I got 10 seconds of dead air because you're frozen. Just push a button, push whatever. Turn on the microphone and say, Bill, I'm frozen right now. I don't know which button to push. And I will make light of it. I may tease you. But you've got to stop trying not to fail. I want you tomorrow morning. I want you to suck. I want you to have the worst show in the 6 months we've been together. I want it to be a train wreck. I want to have to go to my daily meeting with my boss and explain to you why it's my fault. And I'll take the blame. But you need to be awful today. Guess what happened? Best show he's done, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Gave him permission to fail.
Yeah. I wonder if you got any of that from your parents.
Well, I talked about the DNA, and that's not just DNA. That's partly learned behavior, right? You see it in your dad, I guess. And they were pretty simple, straightforward people, hardworking, really nice. Everybody loved them. And like everybody, we think about our parents every day, no matter how long they've been gone. But I think the one thing that gave me most was the belief that I could do anything I wanted to do. Maybe to a fault. They built me up thinking I was so smart. They sort of first identified it in me. I have a sister who's 2 years older. So I was a toddler and she was learning basic arithmetic. No, even before that. My dad had an old alarm clock in his hand. He was trying to teach her how to tell time. When the big hand's on the 10 and the little hand's on the 3, it means it's 10 after 3. He was doing that. He showed her 4 or 5 examples. And he said, okay, so what time is this? And I'm 3 years old. And I said, it's 4:15. And my mom and my sister and they stopped and went, how did you know that? I said, you showed Ann how to do it 6 times, man. I got it after the first one. So, and within a couple of months, I was doing her homework for her. Well, let me read the textbook, show the examples. Okay, so if 3 plus 3 equals 6, then I know what 3 plus 4 must be. So they identified me early on in that. Now, it did two things for me. It made it difficult for me to take criticism because they had gloated on me too much. You probably noticed the difficulty taking criticism part.
Yeah.
And that's the downside of it, because there's always somebody smarter. And even if they're not actually higher on the IQ scale than they are, they know things you don't know yet. They've seen things, they've heard things, they have a different perspective. You can learn from the biggest moron in the room. You got to be open to that. So in that way, it hindered me because they gave me too much confidence, and it made my siblings dislike me, and because of the favoritism in the family, because I was sort of picked out as the special child. And there's a huge downside to that. But what it does give you is that belief that you could actually go on the air knowing the prime minister might be in his limo right now and tell him he's wrong. Any kind of performance job needs some of that, but talk radio specifically, it's next level. Like, you have to have next level confidence to do it.
For sure. 100%. Yeah. You think you passed any of that on to your kids? Inadvertently or unconsciously?
Yeah, I will hear my son talk about how he stood up to his boss today on a certain issue, and I have to go, whoa. You may be right, but in the end, he's the boss. And my daughter, my son's a little more like Sylvie, you know her well, and so very outgoing, charismatic, makes friends. Yeah. My daughter is much more like I was as a child, very quiet, but lots going on in here, very smart, very intuitive about people. But also the same thing. We first moved to LA, and I went to pick her up at daycare one time. She's very tiny even now. She's about 5'1" and very slight, but she was really, really small. She was born with spina bifida. It's a later development. And the daycare teacher said, I can't believe Magali did it, but it was such a good idea that you had her do it. And I looked at her blankly, and I looked at Sylvie. I don't know what you're talking about. She said, well, she doesn't usually talk in class, but she put her hand up and she said, I have something to say to the whole class. The teacher, shocked by this, because she doesn't say boo to anyone.
Yeah.
She stood up and said, I know I'm really small and you all like to pick me up and treat me like I'm a doll, but I'm not a doll. I'm a person, and I don't want to be picked up anymore. So leave me alone.
Wow.
Doesn't like to have her toes stepped on.
Yeah.
So,
wow. And what was, did anybody say what the reaction of the class was? No one
picked her up again.
Oh, well, good for her. That's great. Wow.
My daughter and son have both learned that from us, that you stand up for yourself, that you don't quit. I explained to them that I've made it farther and longer in my career than a lot of people who were better than I am at doing it, had more natural ability, but I hung in there. I just kept trying to get better and kept learning and never gave up on myself. And no matter how much I got down about it, no matter how much somebody told me I'd never be a morning man, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to be a morning man. I'm going to do it. I'm trying to pass that along to them, that idea of you decide what you're capable of. Don't let anyone else decide for you.
You know, it's funny, the perseverance is such a huge thing. The biggest thing that anyone has ever done to me, ever, that, impacted, was I'm in junior college, going for accounting, wasn't in radio yet at the time. And I go to one personnel administration class. And so this would have been 1 year out of high school. Okay. And I walk in, and there's an old Wallensack tape recorder. Remember the reel-to-reels? So there's a big reel-to-reel up on the dais, not the dais, is that the right word? Anyway, up on the podium thing. And the guy's not there, and we're waiting. And then the teacher walks in, the professor, and he goes, I'm going to play you something, and it's only going to take about 20 minutes. When it's ended, you can just leave. I'm going to leave. Most of you will not get it, and most of you will not do it, but I'm hoping at least 2 or 3, 4 people in here it'll make an impact on, because I think to me, it's the most impactful thing that I can ever teach you, way more than I can ever do in this class. He starts the tape and walks out. the tape is like 15, 20 minutes of Earl Nightingale narrating it. I remember it. And the whole thing is about how people survive, and this many people, without Social Security would starve. And, it's kind of somewhat grim. But essentially the whole thing was that it's like 0.3% of 100% of the people will have some reason why they will give up on their dream along the way. They might get married and find the love of their life in some small town, and that ends their, they're not moving to the majors.
Sure.
That ends their thing. And there was a whole bunch of examples of that. And it'd be hard to do it here without having it in front of me again. But he's doing the math of, say there's 1,000 people that you're competing for this big job for. And this starts dwindling it down because things happen. They get fired and they get disappointed, or somebody insults them and then they get pissed off, and then they give up, and blah blah blah. And it comes down to, you're really up against two other people.
Yeah.
That was pretty much it. And it was like, wow, holy shit.
Yeah, I think that's true, right? Last man standing.
Yeah. Well, that, to me, my whole life, that's, all the way along the way, it's just like, just keep pushing. Everybody's going to be dropping by the wayside. I'm going to get there. I have no idea where I would be if I took a different class.
Those great moments, right, that stick with you and really help you shape your own life because of the advice that somebody gave you. And it's so true. You just got to be the one guy who keeps going, and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, this has been awesome. We've been doing this for like almost 2 hours now. An hour and 45 minutes. So much in here for somebody getting into radio now, or trying to do podcasts, or just wanting to be a personality type thing, and the things, that would automatically have to go with it that you'd have to bear in mind and stuff. So I really appreciate this, Bill. And it was great just catching up and yakking. I feel like I'm back in my office again. Leaning back and like, yeah, let's go across the street and get some drinks, Anyway, thank you. I appreciate this. So until the next one, thanks for watching. See ya.